Welcome back, Theo. A week has passed and we're
Hey,
still here.
Luca. Oh, yeah. Welcome back. And 1 week has passed. Okay. And we promised to talk about...
No, to continue our
talking.
chat on Next.js, because I think many people might be interested in understanding. But, let's keep it efficient, effective, and valuable.
Yeah.
Jump into. So, Next.js.
Yes.
Great library.
Phenomenal library. Phenomenal developer experience.
Great developer experience. But let's demystify how server-side rendering, RSC, streaming, and all these kind of things are working. Let's go in.
So the first thing to talk about is React server-side rendering. How React server-side rendering works.
Yeah.
Okay. So you write your very nice React components on
well, first of all, Theo, one thing, sorry. When do you use server-side rendering?
Okay, when do you use server-side rendering? You use server-side rendering when you want the HTML rendered on the server, as the name says, okay, to be served on the browser. This has a few uses, okay? The first big use is, SEO, is SEO and provide immediate feedback to the end user. So they see the HTML immediately. You don't need to load the application that needs to render on the client, okay? Yeah. This is the opposite of a single page application, an SPA. And if you have built an SPA, you have rendering happens always on the client. So you instead of rendering, by rendering on the server, the client gets a faster paint on their screen. Okay.
Yeah, first time to paint is way faster.
It's way faster. Okay, so it has feels snappier. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, this is the first point, React server-side rendering. Okay. The second additional one, okay, is user personalization. Okay. So imagine that you want to do A/B testing and do a lot of experiments depending on who the user you are talking to. Yeah. Now, this is where you want to do server-side rendering because you can generate things, you can do a lot of experiments or in parallel, okay? And this is great, okay? Where is not useful, okay, where I find personally not useful, okay, is when the web thing you have built is behind a login, okay, because in that case you cannot do really any meaningful caching on the data, and you only have one user that is already logged in, and probably the application is already rendered mostly on the browser, so you can just call the APIs. Okay?
Like, for example, a home banking application or
like an home banking, exactly. Yeah. Okay, like if it's more of an application, okay, rather than a site, okay. Yeah. Server-side rendering is probably not the best tech, but we're going to talk about React Server Components, and React Server Components changes a little bit that equation. Okay.
Yeah.
So, what is the problem of why is server-side? So let's talk a little bit how server-side rendering works, because it's a key part of all the other things we are going to talk about in this podcast. So the first thing that is there, how it works is, so when you want to render some HTML with React on the server, you receive an HTTP request from the browser or curl or whatever you're using to your Node server. Then that's the day you need to fetch the data from that server for fulfilling that request. This typically involves API calls using fetch or database calls or whatever you need to fetch the data. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Which typically involves some I/O. Okay. And then after you've done all of that, you need to take all of that data and render the HTML. Okay.
Some I/O because, like you were saying, is a heavy string kind of like computation, right?
Now, this is how does that rendering work? That rendering, it's first of all a full virtual DOM of the mode of what needs to be rendered is generated, and then that DOM is traversed. and it's rendered in HTML.
Okay.
Okay.
So it's traversed and then rendered in HTML. Okay.
Yes. Okay. Now, this is an absolutely waste of CPU, to be clear. Why? Because you mostly edit React components as pseudo HTML in your files.
Yeah.
But then that pseudo HTML is compiled away in JavaScript function calls at compile time.
Oh, okay. So it's evolved, basically.
No, it's not eval. So basically, it's compile time. So if you open so it's written, you write a language called JSX. JSX, you can put a XML tokens inside the JavaScript. Okay, those are translated into React.createElement.
Okay, gotcha. Okay.
Which creates a full tree of elements. Okay, that then needs to be rendered as a string, rendered as a string. Okay. Now the problem here, as you can imagine, is if you have a tree of objects of a big list, okay, containing all the individual divs and everything of your app, these can contain easy 10,000 elements.
100%, yeah.
Okay, this is nothing. Okay. Because it's when you start listing things, okay, you can have a block, easily a block in a single item that is, 100, okay, of small whatever. Like it can be anything, okay. It depends on how complex it is, but this is nothing, okay. It can be big, okay. So this is a problem, okay. This is the problem of React server-side rendering. Now, the problem. So this is how it works, okay? Why is this problematic for Node.js and the event loop of Node.js? Because it has that big phase of I/O in front, okay? So the problem is you receive an amount of requests, okay? If those requests, and you do I/O, Node.js accept them all, you can do all the I/O, okay? You start doing all the I/O, you get all the I/O back. Now you need to do the rendering, okay? Now, the problem being that if it might take so much time to do the rendering that it's destroyed.
It saturates, right? The whole...
Exactly.
Because they're queued and your event loop is going to start saturating because...
Yes, the moment it saturates, the response times start growing hyperbolically.
Hyperbolically, yeah.
And it's gone, okay?
And
this is the breaking point, okay? So each React application, but the fundamental part is because React server-side rendering, it's a CPU-bound task, okay?
What about the server components that you mentioned before?
Okay, it doesn't matter. Like React server component, it's completely it's a protocol, okay, between the front end and the back end, and that allows you to render some stuff on the server using this same mechanism, okay? Ultimately, to be honest, is just instead of rendering things on the front end, is rendered on the server and then iterated on the front end, okay? What is the benefit of all of that? Okay, the benefit is you don't need to design an API call, okay? So in order to do that before, you will need to, I need to create an API, okay? Expose an API, expose the security boundary of my API, and so on and so forth. While with React server components, I don't need to. I can just, talk to my database.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. No, gotcha.
Okay.
Gotcha. And
that is the TLDR of it, okay? To be honest.
Okay. And so basically what you're saying is that, just to summarize what we said, is that server-side rendering is, no matter what kind of framework you're using, you're still going to incur into this kind of high cost of upfront I/O operations against how, for example, the event loop and Node are working. And so, but one thing that actually was kind of interesting by seeing Next.js evolving was all this kind of async, whatever communication mechanism and so on and so forth, right? So where do you actually see, like if we look at the modern Next.js, right, at scale, where do you see actually kind of like the potential for kind of like solving this issue? Is there a way we can solve that server-side rendering bottleneck? That's my question.
So I think so. The fundamental problem is that so far nobody wanted to invest the money needed to make this happen. So, and the money, as I said, nobody so far have invested the money to solve the problem. But why they have not done them, I have no idea, to be honest. I'm not in their shoes, okay? I don't want to speculate. I think they've just been busy focusing on the DevX, okay? But the TLDR is nobody has ever wanted to fix it. Now, there is a question of fixing it might require some breaking changes, and that might be the real bottleneck.
Yeah. Okay. Compatibility then.
Backward compatibility. So I'm pretty sure that will cause some breaking changes on React itself, fixing it. And that can be the problem. But to be honest, we have COD mods, we have AI, migrating things is relatively easy. So it will not be a problem from my point of view. Okay.
No, because in the past, right, there was caching to solve it as a
yes, but
practice,
it's a band-aid. Okay, so it's like the slap of I put some duct tape on it. And that's it. Okay.
Also with the use cache, you think, right? It's the same exact. They just change the experience into a direct.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't change. Like it doesn't change. Okay. Like ultimately, it doesn't change. It doesn't change the overall cost. Like you can put all the caching you want on top of it. Okay. But ultimately, if you want to have user personalization, you will need to render. Okay. Yeah. The CPU time will need to burn. Okay.
Yeah.
And the only way to make it faster is dramatically rethink the rendering pipeline. Okay.
Yeah.
Ultimately, like it's very simple, the idea. Okay. Now you have pseudo HTML on when you write the code. Okay. And you have a compiler that takes that and converts into function call. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, the same compiler, instead of converting to function calls, could convert to something that can be more easily converted to strings.
Yeah.
Okay? Like, to be honest, frankly.
Could be, yeah.
Okay? Like, there is a lot that can be done there. Okay? Like, literally, it just requires,
You mean into a binary form, like a buffer that we could potentially...
You can essentially what it needs to happen is when in the compile step, in the build step, it needs to create some sort of template strings. Okay.
Correct. Yeah.
For a lot of the components that are not real components. Okay, like an H1, a div. Okay. If you have an H1 or a div, that's an H1 or a div. It's not going to change. Okay. If it has a property. If it has the class property on it, it's not going to change. Okay.
Yeah.
So I don't need to create a JavaScript object that then I need to string into HTML. Okay. I can just create the HTML string and be done with it at compile time and not do the work.
But my question is, why do they take this approach that seems to be a little bit basic, looking to kind of like it's traditional?
Oh, we can talk about the story of it. Okay. And the reason is, so React, consider this, React started as a library, okay? At the beginning, there was no JSX. There was no compiler pipeline, okay?
Yeah.
Then we have the compiler pipeline built, but it's a separate thing, okay? So there's the React, the library, and then there is the compiler pipeline, okay? And this is the reason, okay? So you can use technically React create elements without JSX, and you can write it manually. Okay, and the first version of React, nobody liked it because you have all these things that you needed to call. Then JSX fixed it. Okay, but essentially it was bolted on top of layers on top of each other, and nobody haven't even looked at it. Okay, into how can we optimize the thing? Okay. And to be honest, it was never on the priorities of a lot of companies for whatever reason. To be honest, fixing this is probably year worth of salary for a small team. Okay, if not, maybe even not 1 year is not enough. Probably a couple of years. So it's really like it's money. Okay, and that needs to be invested on this.
But if you think about the overall overhead that this thing causes to infrastructure
to humanity, yes.
I mean, then at this point, a year or 2 year salary of a team can be nullified by putting 1 cent for each company that uses. Like,
Man,
to be honest,
yes, I am absolutely. That's my point. That's my point. Anyway, going back to this.
We should do a GoFundMe to.
Well, look, I wish. Okay, to be this will be a phenomenally fun project. Okay, it's fantastic. Okay, now even worse than this. Okay. When you have this kind of catastrophic hyperbolic situation with Next, okay, you are very often you also lose information on what's happening inside it.
Yeah.
Because the event loop is blocked, and so
exactly.
you're using your metrics.
That's actually kind of interesting because when we kind of like build, VAT for us was kind of like the main problem that we wanted to solve was the last mile, let's say telemetry, metrics, logs, and everything. Right? The most important part is at the end most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
So it was kind of interesting to see how this thing kind of like affects almost every single dependency from Node, like Next, React, and so on and so forth. But so how can we? I mean, if imagine I'm a team, right, and says, okay, well, I understand all the problems that Next has, but I still want to use it because it's super cool. I'm not blaming them. But what would be actually your suggestion in terms of like tricks or techniques that can be used to kind of like avoid this thing, right? This event loop saturation and then massive amount of scaling necessary.
So it's actually very tricky. Okay, the first bit is, do you really need it? Okay,
server-side rendering.
Yes, if it can be cached, it should be cached.
I agree.
Okay, so this is the first point. If it's personalized user personalization, probably you should be putting that on the front on behind an API and expose it and do rendering on the client. Okay, if it's an app, okay, you might want to do that. Okay, it's a little bit more complex, but probably you get a little bit more robust system long term. So we are going to talk about the case where you cannot not do it. Okay, you want to do,
and I cannot materialize most likely.
Yes,
right?
Yes. So you have to do server-side rendering on the server. Okay,
live.
Now, the first thing you want to do, okay, is to absolutely minimize it. So there's a thing called the fold, okay, and which is where the page stops being seen on first rendering. Now, you don't want to render anything that is beyond the fold, okay? It's useless for your end user.
Yeah.
So it might be useful for SEO, so you might still want to render something, but you want to postpone rendering as much as possible.
As much as possible. Yeah.
Okay. You can see some of these tricks, okay? And you can see some of these tricks in some pages, okay? Some websites have you open the page, and then after, I don't know, couple of seconds, at the right bottom appears the login button or your personal picture.
Yeah.
The way it works is that the main home page and everything is cached, but that component that is used personalized is rendered on the front end.
Yeah, no, I mean, the status check is done on the front end, right?
The status check is done on the front end, exactly.
Which also makes sense, right? Because you might have a session, you might have anything, right?
This is what I'm saying, okay? This is exactly like, You might not need to do, you might be able to do a lot of caching, okay, in your page and minimize the rendering, okay?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's just, but also the personalization. To be honest with you, I mean, build massive scale personalization. It's kind of like ridiculous to see that we still do it. Live personalization. I mean, we're not building like Teslas that they need to react to surrounding. They're just websites that need to react to offers. So you can potentially pre-materialize all your segments and have a proxy that intelligently knows to which segment you belong and then send you there, right?
Now,
Without...
the other point, okay, is thinking that doing suspense or doing render to stream, okay, in your application will actually improve any of the load on your server. It's going to improve the time in which you receive the user receives some of the data, okay, but it will increase the cost on your server.
Yeah.
No, you say yeah, Luca, because you know very well distributed system, okay?
True.
And
but
if you know very well distributed system, you know that if you have a unit of work, okay, and that costs you 1 to do, and you chunk in 100 times, in 100 smaller chunks, you actually end up paying 120 at least.
Correct. Yeah, but I mean, I think there is also another thing is that, and I think we discussed that a few times, right?
Yeah.
The biggest issue of modern system is that they require such a high degree of knowledge of distribution, because they will never work, like you were saying, a single unit of work. But the experience kind of like doesn't expose this complexity, right? It's all kind of like hidden cost. I was talking with our Italian friend at one of our customers, and we were talking. He made a cost estimate on running all their front end, and he says it's around like a few $1,000s a month, right? And I said, that's surprising. And he said, yeah, I'm also surprised because the overall cost of the front end is around 60 grand a year. And I said, yeah, but that's the net cost of your infrastructure, like pure and simple net cost. You need to look at all the hidden cost of your application. Monitoring, all the reliability, all the kind of like cost of maintenance, all the things. So when you look at the cost, there are so many other hidden costs, and you go easy in a 10x, right? So the 20% that you were saying in distributed system is nothing compared to all the other hidden costs attached to it, right?
Yes.
And that's the cost of running such a distributed kind of like architecture. Well, we touched about actually kind of like a little bit monitoring with this thing, but yes. I mean, when you think about, like, for example, I call it distributed rendering, but it means like more kind of like stateful rendering, or call it as you want. What are kind of like the metrics and observability that we need to account for? Because both on node side, on general side, infrastructure side, so what shall we really look at to understand what is the gross cost of everything, but especially if something goes wrong? Where should we go and look? Like, I give you an example, right? In our past life, we jump many times on last minute intercontinental flights, 12 people with React server-side rendering.
Yeah,
big time, we know the things inside out, right? We even made bet while we were at the airport on how long it would take actually to figure out the problem that they were having. And, we cannot name the customers, but many of them kind of like suffer all the same problem.
All of them.
So because we knew what to look at. We were cheating. We knew exactly what to look into.
No, but the problem with server-side rendering is immediate. Okay, it's already known.
Yeah, but because we know also where to look to kind of like
you can. So the fundamental point, the fundamental metric you want to monitor for this system is event loop utilization. you need to be sure, measure that metric, okay, and have never ever saturate. When you start saturating, you're doing it wrong, okay?
And so, for example, you need to implement LRU or use cache or anything
you need to start working on it, okay? There is a lot of different choices, a lot of different possibilities, okay? To be honest, you might even consider, look, I am putting a smart proxy in front of the system, and if the metrics are unavailable, okay, if my pods are unavailable, I am erroring or returning some stub code and rendering on the front end.
And one thing that probably is interesting in the last few minutes, Theo, because, you know, when we built the flame graph functionality in VAT, for us was all about giving access to people to immediate signaling, right? So imagine that I'm listening to this podcast and I say, damn, now I'm starting to think that I'm doing server-side rendering wrong. I want to figure it out. So what would be the thing that you look in a flame graph to immediately spot this issue? What are the things that you look when you see, you know, you and I can open a flame graph and spot it. But like if you have to explain to somebody, open a flame graph and ...
Oh,
what
you
should
see a
actually pop to
massive,
your
you
eyes?
see a massive flame coming up or down, whatever, okay, of the component rendering, and this is massive. And now
And
you
the
see
block is long or
it's
short?
long, but more importantly, it's the depth that's killing you, okay, and because all of that goes into the stack, okay, and it keeps a lot of data big. So you have that big block, and then you have a big block of garbage collection. In fact, there is actually worse on the garbage collection than you can possibly imagine, okay? Those systems, in order to run React server-side rendering system correctly, you need to tune the GC. There's no way you can run it. You're leaving at least 10% on the table by not tuning the GC.
Yeah, yeah. Because, I mean, and probably, I mean, we already spoke so many million times about the garbage collector, but probably like in a minute, literally in a minute, where is the problem there with the garbage collector? Like if you need to
in a minute,
60 seconds.
in a minute, the problem is V8 Node.js JavaScript runtime has two garbage collection mode. Okay, one that is very fast for object that needs to be collected very quickly. Okay, one that is very slow and is for objects that stay around a long time. Okay. When you're doing React server-side rendering, it takes so much time to do all that computation, and it takes so much data to do all of that, that you might go over the amount of space that is available for the one that is very fast. So that the only one that can clean that thing up is the one that is very slow. That's it.
Yeah, and kind of fun enough that node doesn't know the context, right? They only look at the length of life cycle of the object to be flagged either fast or long. And automatically anything that is server-side rendering, like you were saying, has an immense impact on the ELU. So clearly it's going to take longer and it's going to be flagged as long-lasting. So that's kind of like the thing. So what, and you know, we are almost at time, at our 30 minutes, but what I want to say is that you know, server-side render is a well-known beast, but still not really addressed in the ecosystem, right? Because that's the small kind of like summary we can say. So the only thing that we are left with is ask yourself twice, knowing how things work, if server-side rendering is really necessary, and B, are you really implementing all the tools that you need to perform well in a server-side rendering environment? And last, because we need to say it, if you're not using VAT, you're leaving behind a big chunk of opportunity of having optimizations and things done out of the box instead of you having to do it yourself.
Yep.
But probably, you know, around this podcast, we're almost there to show some interesting data, right, with the world on some of the nice findings that we had and so on. So I think, you know, I tell everyone, that we are investing massively in this space. We believe that we are cracking a very good solution to finally put an answer to run Next.js in enterprise. And we hope that the ecosystem will positively receive what we are building and maybe want to collaborate and try to find solutions together, also to provide solutions that they are only accessible through a vendor locking solution. Maybe they can become more open for everyone, and we can finally put a pin on this problem. What do you think?
Absolutely, let's do it.
So Theo, today we try to keep it really at 30 minutes, and I think we did a good, rundown on the problem. I hope everyone found it useful. And till then, I think we are at the last few episodes before the Christmas break. So until then, I'm gonna say see you next week, and maybe next time we will start to see some Christmas decoration popping up before our break. Ciao Theo, see you next week.
Bye,
Ciao
Luca.
guys.
Bye,
Bye.
bye, 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 bye.